Welcome back to the I Am Symposium, 17 days of inspiration with wise sages who have helped me along my journey get to where I'm at the place where that I would be launching this book, Winds of Spirit. And we have with us today Lisa J.G. Weikel, who is an author in her own right of owl medicine. She's a writer, a shamanic practitioner, and sacred listener. We're going to learn about that listening today. In addition to offering one-on-one sessions, Lisa also leads listening retreats and offers others more long-term opportunity to bring a shamanic perspective into our everyday lives. Her evolution has led her from engaging in a small-town general law practice to women's rights advocacy, having been a lawyer since 1983, to writing a spiritual memoir about her initiation into the value of discernment and energetic work, to her present focus on shamanic healing work and sharing techniques of living a shamanic life with others. She is presently writing a sequel to Owl Medicine. I'm really grateful you're here, and she's one of my staunch believers, even when I couldn't write, and there's still some question about whether or not I can write.
No.
She helped me launch into the Holistic Healing Network with the, the Business of Healing Symposium way back in 2005.
Yes.
I think, was it then? Yeah. And
2005, 6.
Somewhere along there. So we've known each other for a long, long time. And all of those things have been building this platform of how this work of this I Am Symposium can connect us to the people who are doing work in Pennsylvania and the people who are doing work in Ireland and the people who are holding space throughout this world in this delicate balance that we are in. And as we are into this period of this, the solstice, this darkness, and I really believe personally that we're in this collective darkness. And I think that Lisa has come upon something that's a crucial key element to how we move forward in society, because I think she's way on to this idea that listening is key. And so I'm thrilled that you're here today. I'm thrilled that you're in my life, that you're my friend, that you've read Winds of Spirit, and you're here to help launch. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Renee. Well, I'm thrilled that you asked me again to participate in the I Am Symposium. Thank you so much. And
for building a fire too.
Hey, well, it is, yes, to be honest, but it is source of warmth
and light.
And light on this solstice. It isn't solstice yet, but it will be by the time people hear this. I am passionate about listening, and I've become more and more so as the years have gone by. And when I was thinking about talking to you today and why I feel listening is so important, of course, I think about what I tell people when I lead my listening retreats. But even before I started the listening retreats, I realized that listening has actually been a passion of mine for, I guess, all my life. And when I say it's a passion, I don't mean that it comes easily. I mean that when I'm engaged in true listening, it feels right. It just feels like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's kind of the same way with me and how I feel about writing. And writing may be a passion. It doesn't make it easy. And when I'm writing, I feel, yes, I am supposed to be doing this. But whew, making time for it and committing to doing it right, those aren't always easy. And I guess I tried to jot some notes here.
Can I just interrupt you 1/2 second? I'm sorry. When
No.
you were just talking about listening,
Mm-hmm.
this blue streak of light came down and fully covered you as you were talking about the sacred practice of writing, and I honor whatever spirit, whatever energy just came in to welcome this conversation. So I will shut up again. Sorry.
Thanks for noticing. That's pretty cool.
Wait till you see it.
I may have seen it, but I'm trying so hard to keep my act together here and make sense that. So when I think back, I guess briefly, I just want to tell you when I really started to realize the value of listening. And that goes back to my mom. And when I was, I guess in my late teens, early 20s, my mom had a friend, Aunt Sue, and her husband, Uncle Gordy, and they had 3 kids. And they were all older than I am. I'm the youngest by a lot in my family. And so their kids were all more the ages of my older brothers and sisters. But they had 2 sons and a daughter. And it must have been when I was just starting to go to Penn State. So I was, late teens, early 20s, because my mom and dad and Aunt Sue and Uncle Gordy would go to Penn State games and visit me when I was up there. So the 4 of them would sit in the car and talk and make the trek up there. And Aunt Sue took me aside a number of times, which I found a little disconcerting at the time because it was over a period of years, but now I get it. When I was in Sweden, or right before Sweden, when I was in high school, their youngest son, who was athletic, smart, did all sorts of great things. He was a really wonderful young man. He was in his mid-20s, late 20s. He drowned in the Delaware River, kayaking or something. I mean, it was just a really, really weird fluke thing that he died and he drowned. And my Aunt Sue went into an absolutely unconsolable depression. And she told me that, like I say, a number of times, that their drives up to Penn State, my father and Uncle Gordy would sit in the front, and Aunt Sue and my mom would sit in the back. Just the thought of that whole sexist way of being annoys me, but they were old school. So, but they would sit in the back, and my mother would listen to Aunt Sue talk about Jeff, her son, and just all sorts of things, not just about his death, but more I think about his life, and also about how she felt as she was moving through her grief. And I feel like, indeed, my mother's listening actually, it isn't even a case of me feeling it. I know Aunt Sue told me that my mother saved her life by listening. That's all my mother did, was listen, and didn't try to fix her, and didn't try to minimize or aggrandize the situation. It just was what it was, and she held space for my Aunt Sue. And like I say, Aunt Sue told me a number of times how she truly felt that my mom had saved her life. And of course, if Mommy happened to be in the vicinity when Aunt Sue was telling me this, she'd poo-poo it, or pretty much she'd just walk away is actually the way my mom was. So fast forward to, 10 years later or so, and my mom died, and I was tasked with writing her obituary. And it really made me sit and think about her life. And it made me realize how actually she had been a listener, a sacred listener all her life. She'd always listened to me. That was my personal experience. I don't know how my brothers and sisters experienced her, but she also was a really deep listener to her other friends. I could see it when I reflected on her life and how they would be when they would get together. My mom was always the one who listened. And I know she listened to my father, and she was a librarian. And I know that all the teachers and the other librarians really treasured her for her presence. So that was what my whole eulogy was about for Mommy, was what a great friend she was and what a great listener she was. So how does that lead me to where I am now? It's funny. I did go on a vision quest, and that's going to be in my next book. And I was given a name. I was given a name by Grandfather Spirit in the Inipi following coming down off the hill. And the name is She-Wolf Who Listens. And that name resonated so deeply and profoundly within me and felt so sacred that I'm only just now starting to share it with the world. Like, I'm even a little bit reticent to even say it here, but it does happen to be the working title of my next book, She-Wolf Who Listens, because obviously, I'm bringing listening truly more forward into my life and also into the world because of my passion for listening. So I feel it's a great honor to carry that name, She-Wolf Who Listens. And I've wondered how I would step into the power of that name, because I felt it was so powerful. And it has taken me like 25 years to get here. Here I am. But I am, at least I'm trying to start to step into that. And part of that is leading listening retreats, because I look around and I see the need. And indeed, it was right before my very first listening retreat, like literally, as I was driving around that morning, that I was kind of hit with that blue ray that you saw earlier. But I had to pull over and write down what I got, because it was so profound to me. When I realized that in our society right now, there's a great deal of importance placed on telling our story. And indeed, it is really, really important for us to pay attention to the stories that we tell, to actually telling our stories, and to changing our stories. But if there's no one to listen to our stories, then what's the point? And it was like a lightning bolt, because it's great to be telling our stories. And if everybody's out there telling, who's listening? Precious few, quite frankly, in my experience. So I realized how healing, how being a sacred listener is truly being a healer. Because when people tell their stories, and when we even tell our own stories, we only heal if we listen. We can tell a story to ourselves a million times, but if we don't listen to what our soul is yearning to tell us, or what our body is trying to tell us, I mean, there are so many ways that just listening to ourselves is essential to our healing and also just our general well-being. But then you extrapolate that out and expand it into the world. And I mean, listening to other people, I mean, that can really, really be difficult, especially, now, given our particularly anxious circumstances politically. It's hard to listen and not jump into wanting to defend how we feel or think about what we're going to say next or blah, blah, blah. So listening is just essential. So that's why I give listening retreats. And a lot of times people will say, well, they kind of assume that it's a silent retreat, which I find kind of funny. But I do usually begin a listening retreat with silence, because there's so much noise enveloping us and bombarding us all the time that it's kind of like I feel like we need to cleanse our palates when I have a listening retreat. It's kind of like everybody gathers and then, okay, we're just gonna shut everything down for a moment, and actually it's for longer than a moment. It's for several hours. There's no talking and just being and just being, really, not even listening, because I don't even really talk about listening until the next day. So in these retreats, I begin by cleansing everybody's palate by just getting into silence. But then throughout the weekend, I give people the tools to begin listening to nature. And I try to impart how a truly sacred listener doesn't just hear with their ears. They listen with their entire body and soul. When I'm with someone, for instance, particularly when I'm in a session with a client, usually they'll arrive, and just walking into my office, people tend to just start to talk. Well, I'm here because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wait a minute, hang on. What I do first is I open sacred space, because that totally shifts the energy of the conversation, because it makes people feel safe, because they are safe, because it is so much safer to be in sacred space and and feel comforted and feel, when I open sacred space, I call in, the directions and the winds and the elements, and you can feel them come in. So people know, okay, this is sacred. So it's important that we learn how to hear and listen with our entire body. So when we're sitting in sacred space, I perceive more than just their words. And I try to help them hear themselves and listen to what perhaps their own soul is trying to tell them. And trying to help, and sometimes their soul is trying to show them how they've engaged in patterns that need to shift or just need to be recognized. But I digress, because when I go back to the listening retreats, that's what I'm trying to just give people an experience of, is what it feels like to open our greater senses to listening, first with nature, but then I try to give them tools to listen to each other. I have people pair off and listen without helping, without having to have an answer, without having to fix someone, without having the need to share their experience. Sometimes people just want I should say, they need to be heard at the deepest soul level and not have their experience compared to anything or anyone or fixed or made sense of. They just need to express it, and they need to have it honored and witnessed. And there are three things that I encourage people to do in order to be a truly good listener, and that's to be present, if you're going to listen to someone, really show up. Don't be sitting around looking at your iPhone. I mean, that's an easy gimme. Everybody knows how obnoxiously distracting our phones are. But, even before there were iPhones, there were people who would be looking at their watch or I don't know, just not able to focus. So the first rule is to be present, to show up and actually want to give your time and your focus to the other person. Second is to pay attention. And that means really following what their story is. Because you know what? It's rare that somebody will tell a story in a linear fashion. Notice how I'm jumping all over the place from, high school to now to blah, blah. But that's kind of more how we live our lives. This whole linear time thing is all an illusion anyway. And it's reflected in the way we talk, and it's reflected in the way we tell our stories. They are more holographic. They are, and it's really hard sometimes to pay attention to those stories. It's hard to pay attention to what a person is saying when if you're not paying attention. Like it's hard to follow, and that's really essential, because sometimes a memory that's triggered from a long time ago, when they're talking about something that's happening now, and they may tangentially mention that, if I'm paying attention and I'm hearing all these different connections, I can bring those connections to their awareness and help them listen to themselves. But I can only do that if I'm paying attention. And the last thing that I feel is essential to being a good listener is honoring what you hear. Now, when I'm with another person, honoring it is tying all these things together, showing that I was present and paying attention by noticing the patterns and helping them see what or hear what they've said. But I think a huge part of listening has nothing to do with other people. It has to do with listening to ourselves, and also listening to our guidance and our inspiration and the guides and allies, the unseen ones who come in when I open sacred space, but who are always with us. And if we're receiving, if we're present and we're paying attention to the signs or to the messages, if we receive them, we need to honor them by writing them down. So then I bring in my other passion, writing, which can drive people nuts, but oh well. So there's presence, paying attention, and honoring. And those, I give people who come to my listening retreats an opportunity to exercise these ways of being in various situations. For instance, with themselves, with nature, with each other. And then another aspect is I teach them just the really basic fundamentals of journeying, which is going into another realm, altering our brainwaves so that we can enter another reality and have conversations with allies or guardians or guides. We all have the ability to do this. Some people find that they're better at it than others. It's just like any other talent. It's just like any other skill. You usually get better at it if you practice. And there are, some people who just are like, meh, yeah, I know it. I tried it. It's not for me. It's like playing the tuba, right? I mean, you might try it. Yeah, you can do it, but not going to go there with your life, right? So I teach them how to journey, but I also introduce them to other kind of transitional tools, which are the tarot, other oracle cards, and which leads me to the Winds of Spirit, and why I'm so excited and so over the moon proud of you for doing this work, because it's really deep work, Renee. I mean, like I have said to you, it reminds me of the Mother Piece tarot deck, which was my introduction to tarot, because raised as a Catholic, I don't know, I had some weird, like, oh my God, tarot's evil, which I don't even remember anybody ever actually even saying that, but it was some weird thing, I think, that Catholics are taught, that you don't mess with the tarot. Either that or it's a throwback to some life I probably lived as a witch. What can I say? Oh, can you believe that a phone is ringing? No one ever calls my regular phone. I'm sorry. I don't know what you do. We just want to pretend it's not happening. Oh, anyway. Oh, Nature Conservation is calling for a donation. There you go. Okay. That's probably a message too. I should probably listen. They want money. Nature. So what I want to talk about really quickly, because I know I'm droning on and on, is the importance of oracle cards and tarot cards and things like that as a segue, as a means of establishing communication that might not otherwise come as easily to people. And why I'm so excited about Winds of Spirit, because you're adding a whole dimension of understanding and personalities, having done so much research on the winds, on the different winds. And that's why it reminds me of the Mother Piece, because Vicki Noble did such deep research on feminism and feminism, really. It was, and matriarchy. And her book is so rich. There's nothing else like that except Now Comes Winds of Spirit. And I really do see an analogy there. And I really do think that your research helps us establish relationships with these winds that will help us listen to them. Because in that listening, I mean, when I say that it's important to honor what we hear and honor when we're listening, when we receive messages from another person, from ourselves, from Boreas, they appreciate being acknowledged and having us want to establish a relationship, because that's what I do when I listen to people. I'm establishing a relationship of trust and honoring their experience and honoring what I'm hearing. So when we ask for insight from the winds, and we have a particular wind come in and show up, it's so rich for us to not only listen with all of our senses to what that wind is telling us, but also to have the background that you give us so that we can maybe understand where they're coming from, where that particular wind, it might have a particular personality because it's come from wherever, Brazil or, from Scandinavia, or they all have different personalities for a reason. And that aids us in listening to them and in establishing a relationship with them. And it just makes life richer, which I feel listening overall does for all of us. It makes our lives richer. It gives us an opportunity to heal ourselves. If we listen to ourselves, it gives us an opportunity to heal our loved ones, even people who we don't know at all. Just even being in a grocery store line and looking at a person and knowing that they really want to be heard when you say, "How are you?" And you can tell that they don't want to just say, "Fine." Really listening even in a moment when they say, "Oh, I'm having a really hard day." Listening to them and acknowledging how that's really got to stink. And I hope me smiling at you makes you feel better. It can change a whole day. It can change probably more than we even realize. So I feel like I've gone all over the place here with my listening. I don't know. Have I made any sense? Do you have any questions? And by the way, before I say one more word, I want everybody to know that you did not ask me. Oh, nice, Sami. You did not ask me to hype your book, and I am happy to do it because I am so proud of you, and I really am excited about the opportunity to learn about and establish relationships with these winds, because the winds really they surround us. They're unseen and yet so incredibly powerful and pervasive. And I'm excited. I'm so proud of you. So.
Oh, there's a real listener for you. And she's in the middle of her talk and then starts going on about your wind book for, the last whole segment of it. And speaking of listening, Sami came right in and, if you don't know where to start even talking, because some people haven't been listened to for so long, we have our wonderful, wonderful pets that love to listen to us. And, and something you said, Lisa, about so many of us are so broken in that we want to, when we hear something, we're halfway through their sentence and we want to fix it for them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the hardest places of just a being. I mean, I've thought of times, and sometimes I'm not a great listener. I mean, I do okay, but but you're like a real listener, like somebody that that you can rely upon that way. I'm already halfway through the sentence. I'm going to tell you what you can do, how you get back on track, blah, 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 blah. So there's this I love this about your work and about you. And I don't know if you wanted to bring that story full circle, or if that's where we left that story about the listening in the backseat of the car,
that was just that those trips up to Penn State and back. Aunt Sue just made it very clear that those opportunities to be listened to by my mom and witnessed and honored and have her experience of losing her son honored saved her life. I mean, literally, that's what she had said to me so many times. And it was just like, okay, I get it. Like, I was what, 20, and it's like, yeah, I know, I know, but little did I know. But I feel like it's so cool that I can honor my mom by carrying on this, I really do feel it is a calling. And I never would have thought that. I didn't think it when I was given my name. But that whole name, I mean, and it's a big name. And I'm not saying it's a big name for other people. I'm saying for me, it has been a real process to give myself permission to step into the power of that name. And with the wolf part, I feel like, that entails going out and teaching it
Mm.
As you know, having dragged me kicking and screaming into talking, this is like the worst thing for me to have to do. You know it. I'll write, I'll listen, but talking. But that's part of the deal. That's part of my responsibility in coming here in this lifetime, I guess. So it has taken me a while, but I'm slowly but surely trying to listen. Listen, there we go.
Funny. and I think this topic is so very important. I'm putting it at the beginning of this 17-day solstice event, because I think that if you could take just one or two of the suggestions that she said, like turning off your cell phones and really listening to what each of the people the winds chose the people for this solstice. And so if you could listen to the people that the winds want you to hear from, and how do I know that the winds chose them? Well, they were all people that I met along the way, but then like there was somebody I invited in. No, the wind said, oh yeah, the wind told me, and the wind told me. And so, and trust me, these winds have to yell at me sometimes in order to hear. But so this is at the beginning of the solstice. This is on the first day, so that you can really put yourself into a place where you can receive the information, because there might be one gem 10 minutes into somebody's talk that you need to hear. And if you're, texting on your cell phone and doing what you do, you're going to only hear part of it. And so I think what Lisa's trying to tell us is you bring all of yourself to listening. And so what would, just leave us with one last thought about listening. And, oh, by the way, make sure you're signed up for the I Am Symposium, because then I'll give you a link to Lisa's website, which is
owlmedicine.com.
Easy to remember, owlmedicine.com. And she probably has something, if you sign up over there, that you'll get information on her listening retreats. But I want you to leave us with one way that the listeners on this symposium can know that the quality of their listening, that they can bring this quality to each of the guests that they're going to hear. Like, is it to write it down afterwards, or to...
Well, actually, yeah, I think what I would do is, well, when people are listening, they may be listening in their cars. They may be, I don't know where people listen to things like this. I know the first I Am Symposium, I listened in my car a lot, because I like to drive and listen to things that edify me like that. So, but if they're listening just by, sitting around, then I would encourage them to have a notebook or, their journal. I'm a big journal person too. I think everybody should keep a journal, at least even a little one, to jot down things that zero in and touch their heart, or that totally give them a boom moment, like, oh my God, that's important, so that they can write it down. And I would encourage them to create a sacred space as they're listening. And, set an intention of, if I'm supposed to get something from this speaker, help me perceive it.
Oh.
Because it's not always what we hear. It's if you're driving, or if you're just sitting and listening, and someone says something and it and it shifts something in you. If you notice, oh, wow, that really resonates with me. Pay attention to that, because that's your soul trying to say, wake up, or look that up, or follow that lead. It could be the littlest thing, but if you honor it, I pretty much guarantee you will be led on a journey that will only become more magical. The more you allow yourself to listen, the more magical your life will become.
That's wonderful. So we're going to invite you on this journey along with us to listen for the next to all of the presenters, the ones that resonate with you, and maybe even the ones that don't resonate with you. And I want to really thank you for being part of this journey with me, and for embracing these wins, and for the book that you're writing about the she-wolf. And I was also given a big name. It was called Triunco, and it took many, many years to grow into that. It was about the sound between passing things. And I'm thinking like, well, what could that possibly be?
Oh my God.
Isn't that not the wind? I mean,
oh my God, it's the wind. That's so cool.
I know that was many, 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 many years ago in Chile. So
see, and it took you a while to grow into it and to come to an understanding of who you are.
Right. And we're inviting all of you to come into that understanding during these dark days of the winter ahead, to come into an understanding of who you are and how you are in relationship to yourself. So thank you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.